One, two. Oh, hi guys. Sorry, my microphone went funny. How long have I been silent for, Marcus? Did you hear the song?
No, it's been silent for about 2 minutes. I've been a bit worried. I just messaged you saying, where have you gone?
My computer's broken. So I've been recording for 2 minutes on absolute silence. And now everyone can hear me. Thanks, guys. Um, right. So before we get going, guys, I just thanks so much for logging on, and thanks so much to Marcus. Before he starts speaking, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how this webinar came about. So I had the absolute privilege of meeting Marcus just before our success day. And I'll never forget when he first came into the room, and he's really quite super tall, bearing in mind I'm quite short, but this guy was towering over me, which can be quite intimidating, but straight away you just felt like you could hug him. He was so friendly. His smile just, it lit up the room. Everybody, the atmosphere completely changed. And I had made a mistake in that when I introduced someone as MC, I thought I was introducing Marcus as an FBO, and he was going to tell his story related to his business. But of course, he wasn't there as that. He was there as our fitness ambassador, our global fitness ambassador. Um, and what I loved was when he told me a little bit, like very, very briefly, about his story. It was everything that he has achieved in life and how you simply cannot do things in life without the right kind of mindset. And I could have listened to him for hours. We just didn't have time. But I had the chance to listen to more of it at Success Day. And I know some of you who are listening tonight also had that chance. But it was such a packed evening that he didn't quite have enough time to really go through it. So I'm so excited to be able to listen to what he has to say tonight. And it's all about what he's achieved in life, what he's done to get there, because we can relate it not only to our businesses, but to absolutely everything we do in life. So I'm so thank Marcus. I cannot thank you enough for spending the time to do this with us. So I'm going to leave it to you tonight. I cannot wait to hear it, and it's all yours.
Well, thank you very much for such a kind introduction, and always makes me laugh when people say things like that. Because like, if only my mum could hear, she'd be so proud. But yeah, thanks for that introduction, and it's great to be able to do this webinar and share some more around the champions mindset with everyone. And just to pick up on what Claire said there, whilst obviously it is my story, what I want to do tonight is split this into two parts. And the first is I want to obviously take you through a bit of a journey on my story, but then I also want to share with you this sort of the concept of the champion's mindset, which is something I've developed over the last sort of 3 or 4 years that is relevant no matter what we're doing. It's a mindset that can be used for life, it can be used for us, it can be used for any goal that we've got. So that's what I'm going to do. And obviously, this being a forever sort of a webinar, I'm going to just talk a little bit about some of the products I used as well, because I think it's really important, especially with the launch of the new Fit products, that everyone's got a bit more of an understanding about the potential of those products, not just for themselves, but also for their business. And, you know, I'm sat here at a friend's house because my internet's not working, but wherever I do this, whether I'm talking on a stage at a success day, whether I'm doing this at a webinar, or just sort of talking about my philosophies and my stories with people on a one-to-one basis, like I did when I first met Claire, it's always really surreal because 3.5 years ago, my life was completely different. I wasn't making the right lifestyle choices. I wasn't being focused enough on being the best I could be. And it was partly, if I go back much before that, I'd always had a high level of success in certain things, but I guess I just got to a stage where I was letting myself drift. And fast forward 3.5 years, and it's always a bit surreal to think that I'm traveling the world as a global fit ambassador with Forever. But the question sort of people ask me is, well, what changed then? What made you suddenly one day decide enough's enough and you're gonna do something about it? And the simple answer really is my mindset change. My mind was made. I made a decision. I remember it vividly. It was January the 5th, 2014. I was on a flight back from India. Everyone around me was asleep. I had my reading light on and I just felt really bad about myself. I'd been eating, I'd been drinking, I just let myself go. And in that moment, I said, enough's enough. I'm making a decision. That was Saturday night. I said, Monday morning, it all changes. And I think it's really important to understand that the power of a changed mind and the power of a mind that has committed to a decision, committed to a goal, and said that I'm going to achieve this no matter what. Now, for those of you who don't know, my parents are, they've been quite successful in Forever for the last 25 years. Diamond managers Jane Leach and John Curtis. And I grew up in a household whereby it was very positive. I was taught the art of goal setting and the importance of goal setting from a young age. So when I made my decision 3.5 years ago to get into shape, I set myself a really clear goal. I knew exactly what it was I wanted to achieve. I wanted to have a six-pack and I wanted to feature on the front cover of a magazine. That was it. Those were the two goals, really clear and defined. But I also knew that to go with those goals, and whatever our goal is in business, in life, we need to have a detailed plan. Because if we don't have a plan of action, how do we expect to be able to get to the end point? And I always say to people, when you get in a car, you know where you're going. So you know the roads you've got to take, the direction you've got to take. And a goal is exactly the same. You need to have a detailed plan. And most importantly for me is I think you need to have, or not I think, I know you need to have a really clear mental image in your mind of what it is you're trying to achieve. And the more detailed this picture can be, the better, because what it does is it allows your subconscious to start working with you and start to help taking you towards where you're meant to be. So I had a goal, I had a plan, I had a vision, and I also knew that it would take hard work and commitment. I was under no illusion, much like building a forever business, that you'd have to put time and effort in. But I also knew, sorry, I should probably start my slides. I also knew, so yeah, that was me on this morning of the 7th of January 2014. But I also knew, much like with a forever business, that if you put the time and effort in, if you put the daily discipline in, if you stay focused, if you have good habits, then anything's possible. And with that hard work and consistency, 11 months later, I'd not only achieved my goal, I transformed my physique, and I changed my entire lifestyle in the process. I'd got the six-pack, I ended up on the front cover of Forever's magazine. But in doing so, I changed everything about my life, and I'm going to talk about this concept a little bit later, but so often it's the person we have to become rather than the goal itself that is of utmost importance. Now, for those of you who saw my presentation, you'll sort of know a bit more about the story that follows. But for those who didn't, you might be thinking now and looking at this, or thinking, that's really great, Marcus, lovely picture, thanks. But what actually has this got to do with me? And it's a really good question, because I would be asking the same thing if I was sat where you are watching this. And the simple answer to everybody who's watching is, this isn't about the body, this isn't about the physique, this is about the mindset that enabled me to achieve that goal. It's about the mindset that's enabled me to go on to achieve every single one of my goals since then. But I think most importantly, it's about the mindset that can enable every single person who's listening tonight to go on to achieve all of their goals. But my story didn't end with a six-pack. In fact, it was literally just the start of what's gone on to be an incredible journey ever since. But before I sort of delve into a little bit more about the mindset side of things, I just want to take you through a little bit of the product side of things to explain what I used and how it all started. And as I said, my parents have been involved with Forever for 25 years, so I am very much the product of the product. I've grown up using the products, drinking the berry nectar and using the bee propolis cream from a young age for various sort of conditions that I have. And then following on from that, I've used a lot of the other products, but it was the release of the Fit range that had the biggest impact on my life from a product point of view. And when I started my body transformation, I did it starting with the Fit program. I started on the C9 and then the old school F1 and F2. And seeing the results that got me, I then followed on from that basically using what would now be equivalent of Vital 5 products to support all of my training. But I had a clear goal. Obviously, the FIT program got me so far, and I knew that I needed to push on. So I had a different training plan following that. But as you can see on the slides here, these are some of the products that I've used. And today, if you ask me, you know, the products I use, I use the Vital 5, and then I use a whole wide variety of the daily care products. And I think it's a complete side note, but one of my favorite products has to be the serum. And I know it's obviously designed for the ladies, but I absolutely love that myself. But anyway, that's just a side point. The main product that I talk to people about, that I believe in, that I'm a huge advocate of, is the RG Plus. Now, I won't lie, the very nature of what I did to transform my physique over 11 months was incredibly tough. And it meant that I was putting my body through 4 or 5 really high intensity weight sessions every single week. And having used RG throughout, I can't stress just how good this product is. And it's not just for people who are going to the gym before you suddenly think, well, I don't go to the gym, or I'm not active. This is a product that is beneficial to everyone because it enables you to perform at your optimum peak. From my point of view, not only did it enhance my performance in the gym, it enabled me to train at higher intensities for longer periods without feeling fatigued. And it also helped with muscle mass, strength. And one of the big things for me was recovery, because, you know, when you're putting your body through such extreme sort of weight sessions as I was, the recovery period was vitally important so that when you next went to the gym, you're fresh and ready to go. And for me, RG just enabled me to do that. And if I look at what I do now in terms of traveling around the world, taking on crazy fitness challenges, this product enables me to perform at my optimal peak in all that I do and constantly push the physical limit of what is possible. Sorry, I've been suffering for a little bit of a cold the last few days, so do bear with me. As I said, my story didn't end with a six-pack. In fact, it was just the start of the journey. And for me, it was really important to have a goal after the goal. And as I got towards the end of my body transformation, I started thinking, well, what's next? And again, from a young age, I was taught by my parents that you need the goal after the goal, because if we think about it, the focus, or one of the big focuses for me of life, is about growth. It's about development, and it's about always moving forward. And even if that's just by a tiny little bit every day, it's always going to bed better than the person you woke up. And that's why we need the goal after a goal, because if you have a goal and you achieve it and then there's nothing else for you to aim for, it's very easy to stagnate and for the growth to stop. So I started setting myself a series of goals to keep me focused. And if you look at it from the business point of view, as I said, a lot of this relates to the business, and Forever's exactly the same. If you take a look at the marketing plan, it's structured exactly like that. It's a whole succession of goal after goal. You know, you start your business assistant supervisor, you go to supervisor, you go to assistant manager, you go to senior manager, soaring, sapphire, and so on. And it's that journey of continual personal development that is actually, I think, to a degree, just as important, if not as important, as the goal, because it's about the person we must become to achieve the goal as opposed to the end goal itself. And yes, reaching manager is fantastic, but just think about all the skills and the disciplines and the habits that you're going to have to develop to become a manager, to become a senior manager, to achieve chairman's bonus. Those habits, skills, and disciplines can be applied to any area of your life. So think of it from a bigger point of view about the person you're becoming, this journey of personal development. So for me, this series of challenges was going to be aimed at pushing myself to the limit, forcing myself to grow, to stretch, getting myself out of the comfort zone. And each one would do that a little bit more. So again, it was progressive. And the focus was very much on cycling and mountain climbing, even though I had very limited experience in either field. So it was very much a case of in at the deep end, let's go for something where I can really push myself and have great fun at the same time as doing it. And the first 6 goals I had were sort of, looking back now, kind of quite minor. At the time, they were major because they were, you know, taking me out of my comfort zone. But I was successful in my first set of goals. And it led me to my three main goals for 2015. And they were to climb Mont Blanc in the Alps, to cycle the Tour de Mont Blanc bike race, which is billed as the world's toughest one-day bike event, and then to go to Russia to climb the highest mountain in Europe, Mount Elbrus. And I'd planned to do all three of these goals within the space of 1 month. So it was really a case of challenging myself. And the morning of June the 25th, 2015, to the outside observer at least, would have seemed like the perfect morning to have been on the lower slopes of Mont Blanc. And if I look back now, I remember it vividly. It was a perfect morning. It was clear blue skies, warming morning sun. You know, every direction you looked in, there was endless alpine views. And it was just one of those most picturesque moments where you just think, you know, God, I'm so happy to be alive. But I'd come to understand during the last week on the mountain that the sound of a helicopter signaled that somebody was in danger on the mountain. And my heart genuinely skipped a beat when I started to hear a helicopter buzzing further afield. And as it got ever closer, I started to realize this isn't good, because it was coming right towards where we were on what was the toughest part of the climb for the day, which was literally up a vertical sort of ice face, very similar to the one you can see me climbing up in the picture there. So my heart was skipping a beat, and eventually this helicopter hovered just above us. And as it did, we were forced to take cover, and I looked at my guide and his radio crackled into life. And I wanted to ask him what the problem was, but I didn't understand French. He spoke English, but I didn't understand the French that came through on his radio. And he just looked at me and his face dropped, and I could just tell something was wrong. And he said to me, Marcus, it's not good news. I said, why, what's wrong? He said, this isn't a rescue mission. This is a recovery mission. They're looking for the bodies of 2 climbers who fell from this pretty much exactly from around here 2 hours ago, who are now dead. And at the time, I just suddenly literally sort of froze. I was like, my God, you know, what am I doing here? I'm on this mountain, I'm on this exposed rocky ridge. There's 2 guys who have just fallen to their death just a few hours ago. And here I am risking everything. And for what? To say I've climbed another mountain. You know, I had a pregnant wife at home. And that voice in my head started talking to me, questioning my ability to climb the mountain. And I'm going to go into sort of the voices we deal with in our heads a little bit later, but we all got 2 voices in our head. There's the one that says we can and the one that says we can't. And this moment, the one that says I can't was really screaming at me to say, you need to stop. This isn't something that you can do. And had it not been for developing a mental state and a mindset that enabled me to control that voice and focus only on what I could control, then the story might have ended very differently. But as it was, I developed this mindset that enabled me to just block out that voice and focus on the voice that said, you can do this. You just need to focus on the next 2 meters in front of you. You need to focus on where your hands are going, focus on where your feet are going. And I started controlling the controllables. Anything else outside of that was out of my control, so it wasn't even worth thinking about, worrying about. I had to put all of my energy into climbing that mountain. And that's eventually what I did. And successfully summited the mountain. And I think the real important lesson here is, and this is an important lesson for any business as well, because I look at building forever business like climbing a mountain. You know, every position on the marketing plan is a base camp, is camp 1, is camp 2. You know, you don't climb a mountain in one go. You climb it bit by bit, and you build a business bit by bit. And along the way, there's going to be challenges, there's going to be hardships, there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be disappointments. And much like my trip up Mont Blanc, where there was challenges along the way, the harder the journey to the top of the mountain, the greater the feeling of success when we eventually reach it. And I always say to people, if it was easy, everyone would do it. The top of the mountain would be crowded. It wouldn't feel so special when you got there. You wouldn't feel that sense of elation at having achieved your goal. So my message to everyone who's building a business at the moment, who's experiencing some setbacks and some disappointments and maybe going through some struggles, is embrace them for what they are. They're going to make your victory when you get it so much sweeter, and it's all part of the process. Following on from climbing Mont Blanc, I returned to the Alps 2 weeks later to take on the Tour de Mont Blanc. And as I said, it's billed as the toughest one-day bike race in the world. It's 330 kilometers. It goes through 3 countries, and it has 8,000 meters of vertical ascent. And to kind of put that into perspective, it's the equivalent of cycling up Mount Everest in a day. So its name is with good reason. And when I arrived at the start line, and you can see that picture there where it's pitch black, you know, there's not too many people there. I think there was about 300 people starting the race at 5 o'clock in the morning. I had one thought in my head, and that was, I can and I will do this. There was no question of doubt in my mind that this would end in anything other than me completing my goal. 15 hours later, and things had begun to change. 270 kilometers into the race, having battled some of the toughest mountain climbs in Europe, my body was starting to tire, and that little voice of doubt started to creep back in. It started to question me. It said, Marcus, can you really do this? Have you got what it takes to finish this? And I told it I could, and I would. And I just kept blocking it out. And I think sometimes when you get that negative voice, you just need to quickly tell it the opposite. So if you're telling yourself, I can't do it, just quickly say, I can, I can, I can. Focus on that positive energy. So I pushed on for another 10 kilometers, 280 kilometers in, and finally there's 50 kilometers of this race to go, 40 of which were uphill. And again, I remember it vividly. I remember literally my legs saying, I can't go any further, I can't do any more. It was excruciatingly painful to turn the pedals, but my mind was going, we can, come on, we can do this. And eventually my body just said no, and the mountains triumphed over me. And in that moment, I had to admit defeat. And I never for one moment ever imagined that this is how that challenge would end. And the pain was crushing. And anyone here who has suffered, you know, disappointment before will know what that pain's like. But I'm going to share with you a little bit later how we can use that pain of defeat to our own benefit in achieving even greater success. But as it was, I had little time to dwell. I had little time to dwell on that disappointment, because a week after that, I was on a plane flying to Russia to take on Mount Elbrus, which is the highest mountain in Europe, 5,642 meters. I arrived in Russia in peak physical condition. I'd sorted my mindset out, you know, having just come off the back of a major disappointment. I realized I couldn't let past defeats dictate what's going to happen in the future. It happened, yes, it was disappointing, but I needed to move on. I needed to forget about it and to refocus. So that's what I did. And again, I arrived in Russia very positive. I had that mindset to say, well, I've prepared for this. I'm ready. I've done everything I can do this. Got to Russia. When you're climbing up to altitudes that high, you do a series of acclimatization hikes. So you go up to a certain level, you spend time there, and you come back down to camp. So it starts to let your body adjust to the fact that there's less oxygen at that altitude, because it gets a lot harder to breathe the higher up you go. And on those climbs, I felt absolutely superb. I've never felt fitter. My guide was impressed. There was no reason to think anything other than that this would be a success. And then 24 hours before we were to head to the summit, disaster struck, and I got food poisoning. Completely void of energy. My mindset started playing games on me. You know, I put all of this time and effort in, and here I was with something outside of my control about to stop me from taking on possibly one of my biggest challenges of my life so far. I just couldn't accept that. I couldn't just sit there and accept defeat whilst everyone else in the group sort of set off for the summit. So at midnight, when everyone else was getting ready, I put on all of my kit, and I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm at least going to give it a go. But it didn't take long to realize that I struggled to make it 200 meters from base camp, let alone reach the summit 2 vertical kilometers above, and then back down again. And so another goal had ended in defeat in the space of a couple of weeks, and, you know, yet more pain, yet more disappointment. But I think for me, the lesson I took from this was that sometimes you can give your all, sometimes you can do everything you can within your power, but outside influences can have a factor. And again, there's no point worrying about things like that, because there are things outside of our control, and we just have to focus on the things we can control. And unfortunately for me, it meant, you know, the only thing I could control in that moment was to say, I'll come back and do this again. But, you know, two defeats like that and two big failures at two major goals was a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. And I think at this stage, I was in a position where I had two choices, and I was at a crossroads. And I think we all get to a crossroads when we experience failure in trying to achieve a goal. You know, it might be chairman's bonus you've gone for. It might be that you've been going for manager this month and you've missed it. And we've got one of two choices. The first choice is we say, okay, I wasn't good enough, I can't do this, you know, I give in, and that's it. And the second choice is we say, okay, I wasn't good enough right at this moment in time, but that's not to say that I can't go away and I can't become better. I can't learn from this experience. I can't grow from it and come back and have another shot at this. And for me, that's where it starts to come down to mindset. It's this growth mindset that says, okay, we either win or we learn. You know, we either win and achieve our goal, or we fail and we learn from it and we move on. And I've always thought that, you know, defeat doesn't have to be final, and used in the right way, it can drive us on to even greater successes. And for me, it comes down to how we react to it. So if you fail to achieve a goal and you say, I wasn't good enough and that's it, you know, that for me is the biggest failure of all, because you failed to actually realize that you can learn from the experience. And it's about asking ourselves questions. How can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? What did I do wrong? What can I do better next time? And then to go with that, driving us on to greater success with relation to defeat, is this concept of an emotional connection to a goal. Now, I know growing up that one of the things I was taught through my parents, and I've seen this in forever, is we're all taught to have an emotional connection to our goal. In as much as we start to think what it will feel like when we achieve our goal. So you start to think, what will it feel like when I become a manager? What will it feel like when I earn £2,000 a month? What will it feel like when I pick up a chairman's bonus check? What will it feel like when I put my kids into private education, when we can go on our dream holiday? Now, these are all great goals and these are all great emotions, but they're all positive emotions. So it's like, you know, we'll feel good when this happens. But I also believe that we can use a negative emotional connection to our goals in an even more powerful way. And let me just explain what how that works. And if you all take a moment just to think about a time when you've failed to achieve a goal, you know, think of the biggest goal that you've set that you've failed to achieve, and take a moment to remember how it felt, and the pain and the hurt and the disappointment. And I say that with confidence to know that's how you would have felt, because I felt it myself. You know, when I had to abandon the Tour de Mont Blanc, when I had to admit defeat in climbing Mount Elbrus, the pain of those defeats hurt for quite some time. But I suddenly realized I can use that pain in a positive manner, because I recommitted to my goals and said I'm going back the next year to take on those challenges. And over the following year, every time I was training and it got tough and my legs hurt and my lungs craved more air and I felt like I'm going to quit this session, I simply said to myself, Marcus, do you ever want to feel that pain of defeat again? And the answer was pretty obvious. The answer is no. So it inspired me to push on to become better. So I'm not saying that everyone has a negative emotional connection, but if you fail to achieve a goal, use that feeling, use that emotion to drive you forward. So next time you don't feel like picking up the phone and speaking to a prospect, next time you feel like not going out to do a one-to-one, you don't feel like sharing the product with someone, sharing the opportunity with someone, just ask yourself, you know, do I want to feel the pain of defeat that I felt before again? And if you're anything like me, it's enough to drive you on to want to achieve more. So that's exactly what I did. I let it drive me on. I recommit to my goals. And in this, where we now, we're 2017 now. In 2016, I went back to Russia to take on the mountain again. And it was a trip not without its adversity. I remember getting to within 100 vertical meters of the summit, and we were hit by a horrendous snowstorm where we could barely see 5 meters in front of us. And again, I thought, here we go, I'm not going to make this. But eventually, we battled through and we topped out and successfully summited the highest mountain in Europe. And to this day, my wife doesn't know quite how scary it got at the top, because there were a few moments where we genuinely thought, you know, we might not make it down from here. And I think she knew quite how bad it was. I might not be allowed to go off and climb too many more mountains. And 2-3 weeks after that, I returned to France. Now, I just suddenly realized I do have a video, but I don't have it all set up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you that I went back to France and I successfully completed the Tour de Mont Blanc. It was one of the hardest things to go back and do, because there were so many demons in my mind saying, you failed last time, can you do it this time? I really had to battle those voices. What I'm going to do afterwards is I'll post the video into Claire's team page so that you can watch. There's a short little video that goes through the journey and the story that I went through to complete those 2 goals. And again, I think the lesson that we can all learn here is that we might not achieve our goals at the first time of asking, and especially if they're big, bold, ambitious goals. But with the right mindset, the right persistency, we can achieve all of our goals eventually. Now, I now stand on the brink of taking on the greatest of all of the challenges I've done. And even as I sit here thinking about it, it kind of makes me laugh a bit at how crazy this challenge is. And I will do something this summer that only 39 professional cyclists in the history of the sport have ever done. And that is complete all 3 grand tours. And for those of you who don't know cycling, I'm sure a lot of you may have heard of the Tour de France. There's also an Italian version called the Giro d'Italia, and there's a Spanish version called the Vuelta a España. And together they're known as the 3 grand tours. They're the 3 most iconic races in the cycling world, and totaling about 11,200 kilometers between the 3 of them. Each of them takes 3.5 weeks, and I'm going to be taking on all 3 of them only just 1 day in front of the professional races. And it's going to be a challenge like no other. It's going to push me beyond, you know, any sort of limits that I've reached so far. But I guess the question sort of remains is, you know, how does an ordinary guy like myself, because I don't believe I'm anything different from anybody, you know, I think anyone can achieve extraordinary results once they start making the decisions. And so how does an ordinary person like me go from 3.5 years ago being overweight, unfit, unhealthy, leading a very unactive lifestyle, to being on the brink of taking on one of the cycling world's biggest sporting challenges? And the answer is really simple. It comes down to mindset. And I read a really interesting quote not too long ago actually now, and it just simply said that the mind is the limit. And if we think about that, in that we are in control of our mind and what's happening in our mind, we are the limit. So if you take that 1 step further, the only thing standing between where we are now and where we want to be in our lives is ourselves. We are what's holding us back from achieving an incredible life where there are no limits to what's possible. And it's been by developing this champion's mindset that I've been able to achieve all of my goals. It's the champion's mindset that I believe can help you achieve all of your goals. And it all comes from within, and it all starts first thing in the morning. Now, I know some of you might be sort of thinking, mindset first thing in the morning, how does this all add up? And it all comes down to our morning routine. Now, whilst I have a very set morning routine now, my old morning routine was altogether different. I have to be completely honest. It was quite hit and miss. Most of the times it was miss. You know, I'd wake up to an alarm in the week to get up for work, and I'd always be tired. But, you know, I'd wake up, I'd pick up my phone, I'd open it, start looking through social media, start looking at other people's lives, comparing my lives to people, getting a bit down because they've got a better body than me, you know, they've got a better business than me, they've got manager in 8 weeks and I'm still stuck at assistant supervisor. And before long, I'd start getting into this negative spiral. So I think, okay, put the phone down, get out of bed, turn the TV on. News. News isn't really that positive. It's normally the sort of the stuff that's all going wrong in the world. Same with the radio, same with the newspaper. Now, that was my old morning routine, and I don't know what anyone else is like, but if that sounds familiar to anyone, you know, I know how you feel. But I can also tell you that with a different morning routine, you can start setting yourself up for success. Because first thing in the morning, we have this unique window of opportunity where our mind is a blank canvas. And what's more, our brain is operating at higher brain waves. It's gamma brain waves. And research has shown that gamma brain waves are associated with the formation of ideas, language, memory processing, and learning. So we've got this opportunity to feed our mind positive messages, to start setting ourselves up for success. So my morning routine now is very much geared towards that. So I know that that first 20 minutes of the day is vital for feeding my mind the right sort of information. So it's putting the phone down, turning the TV off, turning the radio off, and instead the very first thing I do when I wake up in the morning at 5 o'clock, because I get up at 5 to train every morning, is I watch a little 5-minute mindset video on YouTube. It's the same one every week. Again, I can post the link to that in the team page afterwards, that people can have a look at that. So I watch that video. Once I've watched that, I'm straight into my cycling kit and I'm into the shed, which sounds a little bit weird, but I've got a bike on a stand in the shed for training in the week. And I'm on the bike, and within 10 minutes of having woken up, I'm starting to physically exercise. So that's starting to get the good endorphins flowing around my body. And whilst I'm exercising, I'm listening to personal development, audiobooks, talks, anything that's sort of feeding my mind with the right messages, the right positivity. Now, I'm not at all suggesting that we all suddenly, you know, go listening to 2 hours of personal development in the morning, but just set aside 10 minutes when you first wake up. Give yourself 10 minutes to start feeding your mind the right positive messages that it needs to set yourself up for success for the day. So it might be watching something on YouTube. It might be reading a personal development book. It might be listening to an audiobook, to an inspiring talk. And it doesn't just have to be network marketing, because I think if we just listen to network marketing or read network marketing stuff, we start to sort of, you know, close our mind to just that. And there's a wealth of amazing personal development stuff out there that you can listen to. And I'm happy if people want to share some of the top books that I've listened to or read, or some of the top videos that I've watched that have really helped me on my journey. But just ask yourself in the morning, am I setting myself up for success? Is my morning routine giving me the best possible start to the day? And if it's not, I suggest you start to just take a look at it and just change a few things. And it's not drastic changes in life. This is 10, 15 minutes in the morning whereby you just take some time to yourself. So that's the first sort of part of the champion's mindset, is starting your day on the right foot. And there's one other thing I do in my morning routine now, following on from the exercise, which is a great one. I learnt this from Tony Robbins, and if nobody here's listened or watched Tony Robbins, strongly recommend that you do so. There's a guy with, you know, huge amounts of energy and knowledge, and one of the things he talks about is changing our state. Now, in changing our state, we need to shock our system some way. And you know, when you wake up, you can be a bit tired, you can be a bit sort of like, you know, not with it yet. And one of the methods he uses is cold water shock therapy. And basically this means he's got a plunge pool, so he just jumps in ice cold water. All I do is when I finish my training, I might be a bit fatigued, a bit tired. When I'm in the shower, I get in, I have what I call a 3-minute power shower. I shower for 2 minutes with the water on hot, and trust me, 2 minutes is long enough to wash your hair, wash your body, rinse, and then I turn the shower onto freezing cold instantly, and I have 1 minute of ice cold water. And it doesn't sound that appealing, but once you get used to it, it's an amazing way of shocking your body and just being ready, really ready and primed for action. So that's my sort of the last bit of my morning routine. So I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. The next part of the champion's mindset is all to do with self-talk. And self-talk might not seem like a real breakthrough, revolutionary sort of topic to talk about, but it's something I think maybe we don't always sort of focus on because we just take it for granted that we talk to ourselves. But when we get our self-talk in the right frame of mind, it can have a real positive impact on our performance and our results. And we all engage in a series of conversations on a daily basis. You know, we're all out, we're engaging, we're talking to people. But I believe the most important conversations we have every single day are the ones we have with ourselves. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, we all have these voices in our heads. We've got two voices. We've got what I like to, you know, the negative one and the positive one, or the one who questions things and the one who just has the belief. Now, I'm human, we're all human, and as much as I'm a glass half full kind of guy, I'm full of positivity. I'm well aware that at times everyone entertains negative thoughts. I'm the same. No matter how much you work on your mindset, there's always going to be times where the little voices creep in. You know, when I was on the mountain, the voice crept in. When I was doing my bike ride, the voice creeps in. Sometimes when I'm out prospecting, the voice creeps in. And it's about understanding that if we don't, you know, those negative thoughts left unchecked can spiral out of control. And I'm sure everyone can relate to the fact that one negative thought, 10 minutes later of worrying and overthinking things, and you suddenly think, you know, disaster, that, you know, the world's going to end, you know, everything's wrong in my life. So how do we stop ourselves from entering into those downward spirals? And it might sound really simple, but it's about having a higher level of awareness, being more consciously aware of the thoughts going on in your head. Because when you go about your daily life and you're walking down the street or you're out in the car, I think subconsciously we kind of switch off, and the conversations going on in our head happen without us really thinking about them. And this is where we need to actually say, no, I'm going to listen to those voices because I need to engage with those voices and make sure that the moment you get a negative thought in your head, you need to snap out of it and replace it with a positive one. Now, it might be really as simple as what I mentioned earlier. If you're saying to yourself, I can't retail the products, or I can't build a business, or there's an I can't, all you need to do is when you catch yourself doing that, just start saying, I can, I can, I can, I can, I can. And I know it sounds really, might sound a bit odd, but you're drowning out that negative voice, because the more you think something, the more you start to believe it. And what it actually does is eventually your thoughts repeated over and over and over again actually change the way your brain is set up within the nervous system, and those thoughts become a belief. And once you've got that as a core belief, it's a limiting belief of what we can achieve. The same goes on a positive mind. Once you've got that core belief that you can do something, your habits start to form around it. So if it's a positive or negative, your habits are going to, sorry, mumbling my words, your habits are going to reflect that. So it takes time and effort to be more conscious about what's going on in our minds. But in being more positive and having a more positive mindset, we're increasing our chances of success. And I always say to people, just think about it from this point of view. You know, it's time well spent. You know, we all can be guilty of wasting time and, you know, being, you know, drawn into sort of flicking through Facebook and all these other sort of social networks. But take the time to work on yourself. Take the time to work on your mind, and just ask the question, what impact would it have on your life and on your forever business if you approached every situation with a positive mindset that said, I can and I will, and I'm going to be successful at this. And start trying to approach things with that mindset. And for me, the notion of self-talk links directly to focusing on the things that we can and can't control. And the best example of this, and I used to have this all the time in my old job before I was thankfully made redundant and set free from a job that probably I'd have still been in had I not been made redundant. I used to leave the office some days feeling absolutely mentally drained. I hadn't physically done anything. I'd sat there all day, but I was just mentally exhausted. And the reason that is because we only have a certain amount of mental energy. Much like each day you've got a certain amount of physical energy. You know, you replenish your body every night, you sleep and you restore the batteries. The same goes for the mind. Now, if you're worrying about things you can't control, if you're worrying about things outside of your sphere of influence, you're wasting energy on that. So you have less of that mental energy to use to constructive, creative, and positive endeavors that are going to move your business and your life forward. Now, again, it's a process where you have to suddenly engage with it and say, okay, I'm switching off from that. I'm not worrying about that. It's easier said than done at the start, but as with creating any positive change, it takes time to develop these habits. But ultimately, once we've got these positive behavioral habits locked in, we'll start doing them subconsciously, and it's only going to benefit your life and your business. And I always say to people, value yourself enough not to entertain negative thoughts about yourself. Value yourself enough to believe in your ability to achieve greatness in your own right. Because I truly believe that every single person has the ability to achieve greatness within their own right. And it's about starting to train your mind to focus on that belief and to limit the amount of negativity that we let feed into our minds. And I think one of the worst places to get that negativity from, and I know we're using technology and things now, but it's social media. I've done it myself, and I did my body transformation, and I got to 10% body fat, and I was not far off my finished sort of goal, and was feeling great, looking great. And I'd flick through social media at the fitness models I followed, and I'd just look at them and say, I don't look as good as that. He's got a better six-pack than me, he's got better biceps than me. And before I know it, I'd be really down about how I looked. And yet, if I looked at where I'd come from and where I was now, it was ridiculous, because I think that's what we do sometimes. We're so focused on where we want to get to at the end. We're so focused on what other people have achieved that we forget to take a minute to stop and look how far we've already come. And I encourage everyone to do that on a regular basis. Every sort of month, every 2 months, just stop and look how far you've come already. You might not be where you want to be at the moment, but never lose sight of the journey you've been on. Okay, so on to the next sort of area that I sort of want to talk about. And as I've gone on to take on bigger challenges and push my body and my mind to the limit and beyond in many cases, I've come to realize it's really true what people say, that the human mind is a powerful thing, but it's only powerful when we use it to its full potential. And it's like every other muscle in the human body. It needs training on a regular basis. It's a daily focus to working on our mind that develops it and makes it stronger. And it's that whole use it or lose it adage. Whatever we don't use, we lose. And our mind is exactly the same. Our mental strength is exactly the same. If we're not testing it on a regular basis, it will start to fade. And, how many of us can honestly say that we put ourselves in positions where we have to test our mental strength on a regular basis? How many of us put ourselves in positions where we have to constantly do battle with those voices in our head? Because I know from personal experience, from all that I've taken on, that when the going gets tough, a little voice tells us to quit. I look at a story of sort of what my mum sort of taught me was, when I was, starting my business, she was like, you need to get used to speaking to people. You need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You need to get out of your comfort zone and speak to new prospects. And I remember I used to do it. You used to be in a shop or having a chat to someone, just casually chatting away, and a little voice in your head would sort of say, great opportunity to prospect this person. And that's the moment where you can step out of the comfort zone and grow. And just as you're about to do it, another little voice says, whoa, what are you doing? Why are you going to talk to them about the business? They don't want the business, and you listen to that voice. But by putting yourself in that position, you can start to learn to switch off that voice and focus on the positive one, the one that says, go on, speak to them, share the opportunity. I often think that mental toughness, or we as people view mental toughness and mental strength as to how we react to extreme situations. Failing to become a manager at the first time of asking, how we deal in the traditional world of a business going bankrupt, you know, the loss of a loved one. These are all major disappointments that we need to overcome. And there's no doubting that failing to achieve big goals will test our courage and perseverance, but the mindset that we need to overcome them is forged on a daily basis. It's about applying ourselves in 1,000 smaller ways and this constant daily application to keep developing our mindset. And for me, you know, if I look at it in my sense, it's the constant pushing of my physical limits every single day that enables me to compete in these major bike races. I think it's funny that often people see the glory, but they don't know the story. You know, you see someone, you know, going on stage to be pinned as diamond manager in their business, and you think, oh, it's okay for them. They're diamond manager. It must be easy for them. But let me tell you, as someone who's grown up watching someone become a diamond manager, it wasn't easy for them. You know, it wasn't easy for Usain Bolt to win the 100 meters. You know, we watch him run those 10 seconds or 9.5 seconds, and we think, wow, like that looked easy. He put 4 years hard work into that. He is rewarded in public for what he did for 4 years in private when no one was watching. That's when it comes back to about the disciplines and our habits. It's not about what we do when people are looking, when we're in the public eye. It's about how we are when no one's watching. Because ultimately, if we're true and we're engaging in the activity that we should be in private, we will get those rewards in public. But we're found out when we don't apply ourselves in private, because it quickly becomes evident that we haven't put the time and the effort in. And for me, that's every morning at 5 o'clock in the garden shed. It's cycling until my legs are burning with lactic acid, my lungs are gasping for air, and all I want to do is stop. My body's screaming at me, stop, quit now. And all I can listen to is the voice that doesn't understand the words pain or quit. I listen to the voice that pushes on, because I know it's that voice that will enable me to achieve all of my goals. And as I said, it's about being comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's about challenging ourselves on a daily basis. It might be for you that you speak to one stranger every single day about the business opportunity. You know, and that might scare you just sat here thinking about it. It might be that you commit to finding a new customer once a week. You know, that means you've got to get out of your comfort zone. But if we want to achieve our goals, if we want to move forward in life, we have to step out of our comfort zone, and we have to do it over and over again, because once isn't good enough. You know, you do it once, you grow a little bit, and then what? You stop again. So you need to keep going. You need to keep challenging yourself on a daily basis. And when you do this, you're going to have to start to embrace failure. And much like I've done, you know, as I've taken on bigger challenges, set even bigger goals, I've had to start to embrace failure and understand that it's a part of the process. And I think a lot of us, and I was the same with this, and you look at the way the Western world is, or the world in general, I should actually say, is we have a negative view of failure. We're taught to fear failure. And I always think, well, what do we fear when we fear failure? We fear failure itself, the actual act of failing, because it's a bruise to our ego. And as I've talked about earlier, it's incredibly painful. And so we fear actually failing. So that's one area where we fear. And that fear can be great enough to stop us from even trying in the first place. If we've failed once, it might not be with this, we say, I'm not good enough to do this again, but it's, I don't want to risk feeling that pain again. And the easiest way to do that is not to try again. So that's one area we fear. We fear what other people will think of us if we fail. So we don't try in the first place. We let other people's views of us stop us from achieving the things we want to achieve in life. You know, one of the things I didn't join this business for when I was young was because I was worried what my friends would think. You know, what my friends think isn't going to pay my bills. What my friends think isn't going to feed my family. You know, other people will think what they think of us regardless. So you may as well go on and do the things you want to do and know that the people who really matter will accept you for who you are and support you in what you're doing. So we've got these fears of failure, and it's really interesting because I think if we rid failure of its negative connotations, if we accept that it's not a reflection of us, but actually an opportunity to learn, then what's there left to be scared of? Because that's exactly what failure is. it's an opportunity to learn. It's life's way of teaching us lessons, so long as we have this open and this growth mindset that analyzes. And it comes back to this whole concept of we win or we learn. Okay, so I didn't achieve my goal, but what can I learn from it? And so long as we learn the lessons, then failing's okay. And I think if we look at the most successful people in the world, in any walk of life, in business, in sport, in media, in anything, you know, people who have achieved great success, accept and understand that failure is an essential part of the process towards becoming successful. And it's this concept of necessary failure that I just want to share a little bit more with you about. And it comes back to this whole seeing the glory but not knowing the story. And the easiest way to explain it, I think, is let's take Roger Federer, for example, arguably one of the greatest tennis players to ever play the game. We see Roger Federer on a tennis court in a major final, playing the most eloquent shots, perfectly executed, backhands, drop shots, volleys. It all looks so incredibly easy. What we haven't seen is the tens of thousands of shots that he failed to make in practice. But with every single shot that he failed to make, he got a little bit better. And he knew that in failing over and over again, he was mastering the shots that would make him become one of the greatest tennis players in the history of sport, in the history of the game. And for me, that's what excellence is. You know, when we're striving for excellence, it's about constantly pushing for what's out of our reach over and over again, falling a little bit short, but getting a little bit closer every time. And it takes mental strength and a strong mindset to be able to face these defeats over and over again, to be able to master a skill. But, you know, without failure, this quest for excellence is not, it doesn't happen. So think of failure as part of your development and training. Every time you endure a setback, understand that it's part of the process of moving you towards where you ultimately want to be. And the more open we are to failure, the greater our chances of success. So if I can encourage you to do anything, it would be to be more childlike in your approach to failure. And the reason I say that is because I'm a dad. My little boy is 19 months old, and it is one of the most fascinating things watching him learn. And it brings a huge amount of like amusement to me. But it also, I think it's got a great lesson, because he tries something, he fails, he gets up and he does it again, and he does it over and over and over again until he succeeds. And I think that's how we learn to walk. But as I said, as we get older, we start to learn to fear failure because we're worried about other people. We're worried about, you know, oh, I failed once, I can't do this. So just be more childlike. Be more childlike in your view of failure, and embrace it for what it is. In doing that, I think what we need to also start to learn to develop to do is to learn to coach ourselves and to self-coach. Now, this is a concept that I've been sort of working on and developing for the last couple of years, based around some research that I read from Tokyo University in Japan. And they did this research basically looking at when we're looking at self-talk, so when we're engaging with ourselves, when we use the third person, as in you or your name. So in my case, it'd be like you, or Marcus, you can do this, or you've got the ability to achieve this goal. It's much harder, their research found, to be negative than if we're using the first person, the I. Now, it actually makes really good sense, because if we think about it, we're all pretty good at giving advice to other people when it's something, you know, looking in on other people's problems. But when it comes to our own situation, we can all be a little bit more critical. Now, by becoming our own coach and using this third person, it gives us that ability to take a step back and look in from the outside. And simplest way to explain this is through sort of two examples. The first, from a forever point of view. when you join Forever, you have a business mentor. The person who sponsors you into the company is your mentor. When you sponsor someone in, you become their mentor. Now, when you sit down with your mentor and you're going through a planning session of what your activities being, what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, your mentor, think about when you've been in these situations, is positive. Even if you haven't done everything you were meant to, your mentor is positive. They instill belief in you. They coach you. You know, you can do this. You need to focus on doing 4 case credits. Marcus, you need to attend the business presentation every week. You need to develop these habits, but you can achieve success. The same is very true with myself and what I'm doing. I work with a professional cycling coach, and we're not together every single day with training, but when he's with me training and stood next to me or in the car driving next to me, and I'm beginning to struggle, and again, my legs are burning, the lactic acid is screaming at them to stop, and all I want to do is just quit and climb off the bike. He's the voice of reason. He said, Marcus, you can do this. Marcus, you've got this. You just need to focus on the next 2 minutes. Block out the pain, focus on the feeling. Focus on the feeling of success. You can do this. So it stands to reason that when my coach isn't there, when your business mentor isn't there, that when we're in those positions where we're really struggling and we want to quit or we're doubting ourselves, that we take on the role of coach, that we switch our internal talk to the third person. So that's what I do. So when I'm in the shed now and I'm there on my own and I'm struggling, I just simply tell myself, Marcus, you can do this. Marcus, you've got this. And sometimes I have to do it over and over again on repeat to block out the pain and let me finish the session. But it's enough to get me through. It's enough to enable me to push past the comfort zone and get the bit of growth I'm looking for. And I can promise you, if you start doing it in your own world, it's enough to move you forward as well. And I think there's enough people in this world who are going to criticize us. There's enough people who are going to doubt us in this world, who are going to tell us we can't do things. And we don't need to add to that. We need to become our #1 fan. We need to become the best possible cheerleader, the best possible coach and fan, all wrapped into one to give us the best possible chance of success. So next time you're in a challenging situation and you're on your own, just think, what would my coach say? What would my mentor say? And then start using that in your inner talk. And one of the best ways of doing this, and this is something for me, if I actually think about it on the champion's mindset, the core questions we ask ourselves are possibly the most important part of the champion's mindset, because they are the part that enables us to grow the most. And the best way to explain the sort of core question concept is through a story. But first, I just need another sip of water, so if you just bear with me. So let me share a little story with you. It's 5 a.m. This is a story that happens quite regularly here in London. It's 5 a.m. and my alarm goes. I wake up, the room's pitch black, and my wife is sleeping next to me. It's cold outside. I get out of bed and I open the curtains, and my worst fears are revealed. It's pouring with rain, and I have to go out on my bike and cycle for 5 hours. The last thing I want to do is get out of bed and go and do this. So what do? I start to let this little voice in my head say, why don't you get back into bed? It's really warm there. Kim will be really happy to wake up next to you. You know, it doesn't matter if you just missed this one session. You know, it doesn't really matter. Just go on, get back into bed. And it being cold and dark and miserable, I start to listen to this voice thinking, yeah, he's right. It doesn't matter. So I get back into bed, pull the duvet up, and just as my head's about to hit the pillow, the other voice in my head says, what would a champion do, Marcus? And in that moment, that question, what would a champion do? Before it's even finished, I know the answer, because I know that the champion would get out of bed and go and do whatever it takes, because that's what champions do. That's what successful people do. They do whatever it takes, no matter what. They don't miss a session, because if it's easy to miss one, it's easy to miss two, you know. So I started asking this question of myself in a sporting context, you know, what would a champion do? And seeing the benefits it had, I started to apply it to all areas of my life. You know, I'll be the first to admit, you know, I like a bit of chocolate from time to time, maybe a bit too much, you know, that's why I got into the state I was in originally. So I'd ask myself, you know, as I go to pick up the chocolate, what would a champion do, Marcus? And begrudgingly, I know a champion wouldn't eat the chocolate, so I put it back. And again, with other things, you know, the more you ask it, the more it just becomes natural and you start to live as a champion. And that's where the concept of the champion's mindset came from. But around that, I've developed a whole other series of core questions. And I think we all need to have a series of questions that help to drive our growth, to help us move forward. And the better the questions we ask, the better the answers, and therefore the more benefit and the more growth we get from them. Now, the sorts of questions I'm talking about are things like, what am I committed to? You know, where am I going? What do I value? How could I do this better? What are my weaknesses? You know, am I being true to myself? And I think one of the really important ones is, what's my legacy? You know, how do I want to be remembered? Now, I'll be honest with you, it's not always been easy asking these questions because I didn't always want to hear the answers. You know, what are my weaknesses? You know, I had to admit that I had weaknesses. You know, I lacked focus at some times. You know, I made the wrong decisions in lifestyle choices at times. And so by identifying my weaknesses, by admitting to them, I could work on improving them and getting better from them. You know, it's like, what am I committed to? You know, I'm committed to being the best I can possibly be. Regardless of what anyone else is doing, I want to be the best I can be. It doesn't matter, you know, in comparison to anyone else. And so what am I doing to be the best I can be? What am I committed to doing to make sure I become the best possible version of myself? And as I said, it's not always easy to ask ourselves these questions, but I keep a journal every single day, spend 15 minutes now in the mornings journaling every day as part of my morning routine. And it's not just a case of writing down how I feel, what I've been doing, but I pose myself these questions. Once a week, I write these questions out and I embrace the answers. You know, another question, what one thing can I do this week that will move me forward from where I was last week? Have a think about it. And I ask the questions in the morning and I think about them until the next day. So it gives me a chance to start going through and analysing them. And then I think, okay, so this week, one of the things I could do for me personally, and I'm holding my hands up here, if I'm saying I lack focus sometimes, is, or not focus, but I can sort of drift from one thing to another, is make a daily plan. Every single day before I start the day, know what it is I want to achieve. At what time, this is what I'm doing. Have that focus. And I've started doing that again. And it just brings back a lot more focus. And don't avoid asking these questions of yourself. Do it on a regular basis and start to see the positive impact they have on your life. Now, I can't look past, you know, if I look how much my life has changed over the last sort of 3.5 years, I can't look past the fact that it changed when I made a decision. And I honestly believe that it takes 1 second to change your life. The exact amount of time it takes to make a committed decision to make a change in your life. And I always like to use the analogy of a ship leaving harbour. And if you think about it, a ship leaves harbour and it's got a set course. And if it just goes, it will head off on that way. If when the ship leaves harbour and it's just exited the harbour, it changes its course by 1 degree, which when you think about it, 1 degree, you're not going to notice that for a long time. It's like almost, you think, inconsequential. But the further the boat gets away from harbour, the greater the difference between its two routes. And life is exactly like that. You know, you make a decision today to make a change in your life, a commitment to do something. You might not see the results of it for weeks, months, even years. But if you don't make the decision, if you don't make the commitment, you're going to continue on the same line that you've always been on. Now, I honestly think there's nothing as powerful as a changed mind. But, you know, we have to change what's on the inside, because if we don't make a decision, the same experiences of life, the same experiences of business, the same results we're getting are just going to repeat themselves over and over again. And to change what's on the outside, we've got to first change what's on the inside. And time's limited. You know, this isn't a dress rehearsal. Life, we get one shot. This is the real deal. You know, life's not a spectator sport to sit by and watch others live life. Life is about getting involved, playing the game. And, you know, it is. Victory goes to those in the arena, you know, risking failing, risking hurt. But they're the ones who get the most out of life. And for me, it all comes down to developing you know, the mindset to enable us to reach our full potential. It's that ability to harness our power to endure, to hold on in the face of adversity. And life is full of adversity. And, you know, we're going to have to face defeat over and over again. And we've got to do that without ever giving up. And for me, this is the essence of the champion's mindset. And it exists only when we know exactly what it is we want in life. And we won't quit until we achieve it. And I just want to leave you with this thought to everyone who's listening, that there's a champion in all of us, and it's time to awaken yours and let the world see your greatness. That's about everything I've got to say. So Claire, thank you very much for letting me share all of my thoughts. It's actually been quite difficult doing this sat still, because as any of those who saw me do this in Dubai, you'd have realized I'm quite a high energy kind of person.
Cannot stop moving.
I've been sat here on on a sofa at a friend's house trying not to like move around too much whilst doing this.
Marcus, I cannot thank you enough. I absolutely loved that, and I bet you anything that everybody else feels the same way. And the fact that you, like, guys, earlier today, Marcus was messaging me saying, right, I don't have internet at home. It's probably about the storms, but it's fine, we'll find a plan. And in this business, we get so used to being let down that I was just waiting for it. I was waiting for the message saying, I'm so sorry, I'm going to have to cancel. But not a chance. He's literally driven to his wife's friend's house, sitting on their couch so that he can speak to us tonight to take us through all of this. Marcus, you and I are going to be friends for life. I absolutely adore you. Thank you so much for doing this.
You're welcome, no problem. I think it's really important what you just said there. I think, you know, it is easy, you know, and I get that. It's really frustrating. People sort of, you know, you make a plan and last minute people, you know, let you down. But for me, when you say you're going to do something, no matter what it is, whether it's, you know, I'm going to read my son a bedtime story every night, or I'm going to be home in time to have breakfast every morning after training with my family, or I'm going to be online to do a webinar. When you commit to doing something, you do it. No excuses, you know. The only one that sort of stops you is, you know, is life or death things. But otherwise, when you've made a decision, just stick to doing what you're going to do.
Brilliant. Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much, Marcus. And I will send you the recording, but I'd love to share it with some wider teams. So thank you for letting me record it as well.
Yeah, no problem. And then, like I said, I mentioned a few sort of videos and bits and pieces. What I'll do is I will I'll put them into your team page, some links to my video, the mindset video I watch. I'll just write out my morning routine sort of things, just to give people a sort of bit of structure of things they can do for their morning routines as well.
That would be brilliant. Thank you again, Marcus. Now go enjoy the rest of your day. And I suppose most of us are going to be off to bed soon.
And I'll speak to you guys soon.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Okay. Bye.